Good morning and welcome to the big story right here on the BDTV Breakfast Show. My name is Elizabeth Musa. This morning we're taking a closer look at the real engine of Nigeria's economy, the hustle. A new report by the Nigerian Economic Summit Group reveals that 93% of Nigeria's workforce is trapped in informal survivalist jobs. If you think about it, almost everyone you know has a side hustle: the tailor down your street, the woman selling food by your office, the neighbor who runs a small POS stand. They are all part of what we call Nigeria's informal economy. The 2025 report, titled From Hustle to Decent Work, shows that 81% of these workers are concentrated in low productivity sectors like small-scale farming and petty trading. These are the people who keep the country's wheels turning, but whose labor often goes unseen, unprotected, and unrewarded. Nigeria has about 40 million small and medium enterprises, but nearly 9 out of 10 operate informally. They are unregistered, often untaxed, and largely outside the system. Yet, many of them still pay levies, not to the government, but to market unions, area boys, and local collectors. So the question we're asking this morning is, what does this mean for Nigeria's growth story? And how can we turn that hustle into real sustainable work? Well, joining me this morning is Victory Okoyomo, is a senior communication specialist at MoneyPoint, which works closely with millions of MSMEs across Nigeria, helping them move from cash-based operations into the financial mainstream. Welcome to the show, Victory.
Hi, thank you very much. It's great to be here.
It's good to have you this morning. Victory, tell us, when we say 93% of Nigeria's workforce is in the informal sector, who exactly are we talking about here?
All right, thank you for that. So it's a lot like you had just said. When we refer to people in the workforce, we're referring to everyday people around us. So if you live in Nigeria, this means, the mom and pop shop across your house. It means the gentleman down your street that sells vegetables and fruits on wheels. It means the lady you see selling thrifted materials on social media, people that have side hustles, right? So when you step out of your house, moving around on your day-to-day, the truth is you encounter these informal businesses, people engaged in informal employment in many different sorts of ways, just all around you. And it's very, interesting to see how pervasive it is in Nigeria.
Right. And what does this actually say about the structure of Nigeria's economy and how people are surviving today, if you were to answer that question?
So I think it's a few things. On one end, it shows you how, resilient and fortitudinous like Nigerians are. We are willing to do what it takes to ensure that we can create the kind of lives that we want for ourselves, right? A lot of informal businesses or informal employment is a response to that need for people to provide for their families, to take care of themselves and make a living. Unfortunately, what this means is that a lot of these people are doing this in a way that is invisible to the government. And that means that while they're putting a great effort to put their lives together to become something and make a living, they do not have the kind of access to support that's available that would help them grow. So yes, it's something of a positive thing because it means that people are working hard to create a life for themselves. But it's also a bit sad because there's a lot of support that should be available to them that unfortunately they don't have access to because they've gone into like informal employment.
Right. And why do you think many of these businesses remain informal despite their size and what it is that they do?
Yeah, so it's very interesting because when we think of informal employment or when we think of businesses being informal, we think of it as something that they are actively doing, right? So a business remains informal. But the reality is that for them, informality is just their default state. So think of a woman who has started a business because she's unemployed and needs to take care of her family. The primary thing she's thinking about is that she needs to make a profit, she needs to feed her children, she needs to pay for school fees, she needs to attend to the bills as they come. It doesn't exactly occur to this person that becoming formalized is something that might be important or necessary to them. So because of this, informality just becomes the natural state that they find themselves. Another thing to consider is that when we think of the size and scale of the informal economy, it is that large because it is made up of millions of small players that are, making things happen. We know that there are over 39 million MSMEs in Nigeria, and a large number of them are in the informal economy. So it's a lot of small players that are, making contributions. And because of this, and how they get into it with that mindset of I need to make a living, automatically, unfortunately, the default is that a lot of them are in the informal economy. And then there are also some obviously misconceptions about what being formalized means. Some of them are afraid that it's going to, expose them to more tax, which is ironical because there are a lot of protections that exist for small businesses that are formalized. A lot of them also think it's expensive. Some think that, oh, I need to wait until I have like a very big, business or corporation before I need to think about that. So because of all of these things, for a lot of them, they just naturally find themselves in that state of informality. And unfortunately, are missing out on the things that would help them grow.
Many of these informal businesses actually get to pay daily levies, just not to government actually, but Victory, if you're to really answer that question, what does that reveal about the weakness of our formal systems if, these informal businesses are still paying, they're so, officially not taxed, but they're still paying, levies to area boys, local collectors and whatnot. What does that reveal about the weakness in our formal systems?
Yeah, so I think that that's a consequence of, of the informal economy's invisibility. So when the informal economy is described, it's described using words like the shadow economy, it's the invisible economy. A lot is happening, but it's inaccessible to like the government, it's inaccessible to like formal systems. So it's not so much about the weakness of the formal systems, right? Because when you look at some of the work that's being done, for example, by Smith and by MoneyPoint and some collaborations that have existed, they exist in order to reach out to these people and help them become formalized and access the kind of support that they need. However, because of the reasons we stated earlier, a lot of them just not default find themselves in this state. And this means that unfortunately, they don't know that protections exist for them. And I think that when we're able to, I guess, build systems, right? Or when they're able to take more advantage of systems that exist to transition them from informality to being recognized, then, they then begin to get more protection and don't have to, for example, pay levies, as you said, to, people that are not exactly recognized or participate in systems that aren't formally recognized, but are unfortunately still, hampering their success.
From MoneyPoint's perspective, what are some of the financial behaviors or patterns that you get to see among MSMEs in the informal space?
Yeah, so I guess the backdrop for this is that Africa is often described as a cash-based economy, right? We often say that cash is king. And while that is true or holds certain truth, one trend we've seen is a greater adoption of digital payments over the past few years. Now, a couple of years ago, if you wanted to buy fruits from the man selling fruits on the wheelbarrow down your street, right? You obviously needed to have cash with you. It didn't make any sense for you to think that this person would be able to accept transfers. But now that is an option. It's an option for you to go into the market. You finish purchasing some goods, and the lady has an account number that you can transfer into. And I think that that's really important because there's a lot that, this access provides for them. But one trend that we've seen is there's greater adoption of digital payments. There's also greater adoption of the things that I guess come as add-on services to this, which means that a lot of them are saving more. A lot of them are finding ways to, access the kind of tools that they need to grow their business that they may not have had access to if they had just remained cash-based.
And how is this access to digital finance? How is it changing the story for small business owners, for traders, or even micro entrepreneurs?
Yes, so I'd like to share. I'd like to share a story. So there's this business owner who uses MoneyPoint, and she had to leave Abuja and move to Lagos because some of her property got seized. And when she moved to Lagos, she wanted a fresh start. And for a lot of people, when they want a fresh start, the default place that they go to is, I need to start a business. And she started to sell provisions, milk, sugar, biscuits in a small corner shop in the market. And because she started to use Money Point, and moved away from, being primarily cash-based, what this enabled us to do is look into her, transaction history, look at how her business was performing, and then begin to provide her with access to credit that could help her business scale and grow. Now, if she did not have access to a digital financial service, what would happen is maybe her business has been growing for a while and she knows she has the capacity to grow further. But by the time she goes to ask for, credit, she asks for a loan, it's difficult to assess how well her business is doing. And because of this, a lot of them also get caught out of access to credit and other tools that would help them grow. Now, the difference for this woman was because she was using Money Point and we're able to see that, oh, this is a business that is growing. This is a person that has capacity to like scale up their earnings. It was possible for us to then say, okay, we can provide this person with access to working capital credit that can give her business a boost. And because of that, she's been able to grow from, having a small shop at the corner to becoming a wholesaler that's able to distribute higher volumes of goods. And this means that, she can take care of her family. It means that she doesn't have to worry about her bills anymore. It also means that potentially she can become an employer of labor, which is a great thing for a lot of these businesses because they impact not just themselves and their families, but other people as well. And this is a similar story that you find across, every local government in Nigeria. Because of access to digital financial services, people are able to, do more for their business and access like a whole new world of support that otherwise they may not have seen or had access to. And this means that they can grow and also contribute better to the Nigerian economy, which is, just a great thing overall.
I completely hear you when you say that. But beyond money, what are some of the biggest barriers that keeping people from transitioning into formal, more productive work? If I I put that in quotes, more productive work. What are some of those barriers?
Yeah, so some of the barriers that exist include limited skills, education, and access to resources. I think one thing we established earlier is that it's not an intentional thing. A lot of people find themselves in the informal economy as opposed to it being what they actively chose. Now, this means that sometimes it's a consequence of where they were born, the kind of education that they have, the kind of skills that they were able to develop. And when a person needs to choose between making a living and maybe spending time to look for something more productive, as we said in quotes, they're going to find the easiest thing because they need to, keep on living their lives. They need to, keep on taking care of their family, right? I think another thing is that there's this perceived difficulty, right, in terms of what becoming formalized means. So, as opposed to truly understanding the process, and I guess also like lack of knowledge is part of the problem here. Because they don't understand what the process involves, a lot of them just by default shy away from it. And this means that businesses that could formally operate and employ people, be a source of productive work as we're using it, unfortunately are unable to do that, right? I think another thing is financial exclusion, right? A lot of people exist in communities that as yet unfortunately don't have access to more formalized banking systems. And the truth is, digital finance is a very important railway to formalization because as we've said, when a business is able to pay digitally, they become visible in a sense. They have like a history. You know how this business is performing, you know how they are functioning, and you are able to make decisions based on that, right? In order to further support them. These are the kind of things that even policymakers and regulators use because, for example, they say, oh, a business that's earning below a certain amount is not meant to pay taxes. The only way for them to ideally know that this is what this business earns is either they, have digital transactions or maybe they are filing their cash-based transactions, right? So access to digital financial services also means that they are able to gain visibility and good pathway to creating more productive work.
And what are some of the ways that the government and fintech players like MoneyPoint can collaborate to actually create real pathways from hustle to growth?
Yeah, so I believe there is a very important dynamic that exists between, the economy, fintech players, and the government. And on some level, we've seen a lot of progress. We've partnered with the Corporate Affairs Commission, for example, to make business registration easier and seamless. What this means is that a business that uses MoneyPoint can just go on our app, submit their details, and get their business registered with the CAC within the app. What this means is they don't have to think about, oh, how long is this going to take? What's the complicated process? And can I successfully get this done? By removing those barriers of access, we've been able to enable these people to move their businesses from the informal economy to a state where they become visible and are able to gain access to the kind of support that we need. Another thing is that we partnered with Smidan last year at the MSME conference, and even this year we're working on the second edition of our informal economy report. Why that's important for us is we believe that with access to data, policymakers, regulators, investors, other key players in the Nigerian economic space can make the kind of right decisions to support informal businesses. Lack of insight into how these businesses operate is a major problem, is a major hindrance that has made it difficult to support them, has made it difficult to create, real impact and pathways for them to, truly grow. And we believe that by providing access to this data, by making this available and accessible to people in ways that they can interact with and use, is important to ensuring that the informal economy can reach its potential. It can become as impactful, right, to Nigeria's economy as it can be. It's already the way that most people by default want to get into business, want to get into employment. Now imagine that we can just make it easier for them to transition into a state where the government can see them, the government can recognize them. And we believe that, collaborations like this, the one we have with Smidan, the one we have with the CAC, can help to make this a reality for the millions of businesses in Nigeria's informal economy.
Finally, Victory, just before I let you go, if Nigeria is truly to move from a hustle economy to a truly productive one, what's the single most important shift that needs to happen?
Yeah, I think we've touched on it a lot in different ways, but the single most important change I think needs to happen is understanding the informal economy's challenges and solving for it. I believe that it would be important for us to move from a mindset that treats informality exclusively as a problem, but instead tries to understand it and create ways to solve for it in a way that supports this business and helps their transition. One example for it is that you see a lot of businesses in the informal economy don't have access to credit. The reality for them also, however, is that they access credit in different ways. Some of them have cooperatives that they are saving with, right? Some of them have, and because they're saving with them, they can also borrow from them because these cooperatives understand how they function. They have different, associations and systems that they've built to work for them in their informality, and this has kept them surviving. So I think that as opposed to trying to radically change what exists for them, we can create pathways and, as we've discussed severally, collaborate to ensure that the informal economy's challenges become its greatest opportunities, from key stakeholders to every single person who is in the informal economy, getting them the kind of support that they need, and ensuring that even though the informal economy is still, large, is still invisible, we can move it to a state where we understand what's going on there and we can build solutions that can truly help them.
Right. Thank you very much for joining this morning on The Big Story. Victory Okome, the Senior Communication Specialist at MoneyPoint. Thank you for joining us this morning.
Thanks so much for having me.
This has been The Big Story right here on the BDTV Breakfast Show. Up next is Social Listening. Do stay with us.